Hi y'all, it's me again. So this is part two of the podcast. We just talked a little bit about compound melody, specifically about Baroque melody, and the concept of fortspinning. As you go on in your reading in chapter 24, you'll notice at the heart of it is this idea of a form called the invention. And the fugue. The invention and the fugue we'll talk about in depth on Wednesday and Friday. And this week is certainly not ideal to cover invention and fugue. It's really meant as just an introduction to the concept. If you're interested in this music, and I hope you are, because it's very dear to my heart, especially the music of J.S. Bach, we will talk about the analysis of invention and fugue in the class next term, the analysis class, performance and analysis. But this gives us an introduction of how this music works. And I think the reason why she includes it in chapter 24, it seems to be kind of a logical way of analyzing forms that are certainly not as clear as the binary and ternary forms, but they kind of have a mind of their own. So what I wanted to do on Monday was to really introduce the concept of the subject and the importance of the motive to Baroque melody. And she uses a great example. Well, there are many good examples in this chapter. Right now I'm looking at page 490, 491, and then into 492 and 493. The idea of the motive and the subject being the primary material that makes a piece like the invention or the fugue spin out. So what you have here is the example that she brings up in the book, a fugue in C minor. I've put it into finale so that you can see it clearly here. And even though this is a piece for keyboard, I've broken it up into 4 staves. Now, right now, these are individual voices, right? I haven't included the other subjects. Mainly because, well, this fugue is a 3-voice fugue, so there's no need for one of these. But it's a template that I use for 4-voice fugues. I just want to talk a little bit about the subject right now. This subject is remarkable in a ways because it's so short, it's so simple. In Bach's fugues, he would write all of them in a certain key. In this case, we're in C minor. A fugue subject or an invention subject should be immediately recognizable. It should be a tune that you could whistle, because the point is, and I think the fun of a fugue, and Elizabeth Marvin brings this up on page 489, is the idea to trace it through the entire work, right? So there's no need to hang on to these large sections or listen to these large-scale developments that we'll get into later in the 19th century. It really is all about detail. And many of Bach's fugues are not long. They might run for anywhere from 30 seconds to, in some cases, 5 minutes, but around average 2 minutes or so, even less than what a typical pop song would be. And the beauty of a fugue is that all of it is spun out in either 1 or 2 ideas. So what you're listening to, the subject, is really everything comes out of that. So in this case, the subject that I've written here is noticeable by its rhythm. Di da di da da di da di da da ba 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 di 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 da 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 da. Later on in the fugue, we immediately have this thing called the answer, and I'll get to that in a second. First, I'm just going to play this through the MIDI instruments. If you can bear with me while we listen to these awful sounds, it'll give you an idea of what this fugue subject sounds like. Okay, right there is the first 4 measures of the fugue in C minor from book 1 of the Well-Tempered Clavier. Now, this subject is 2 bars long. We see the same subject, but it's different, right? It's been transposed up here. In fugal writing, we always call this subject, when it reappears, it always reappears in either a lower voice or an upper voice transposed, usually at the dominant. You can see it's starting at C. It's not a coincidence that he's transposing this to the dominant. This is just a simple trick that that composers used to spin out fugues, that it's transposed up, in this case, a perfect fifth. Now what's unusual about it is if you look exactly at the subject, is this an exact transposition of this? Or in the case of the fugal form, is the answer, which is the subject, an exact transposition of this? And what I mean by exact is if you look at every single interval, and you can see in the book she analyzes this as well, you have a half step, perfect fourth, minor second. Now let's just look at these 5 notes. We go back up here, half step, aha, look, in this case, a perfect fifth up to a minor third. It's different. He's actually changed this so that it fits the character, or at least the tonality of the piece. We have a name for this. Sometimes Bach will transpose it exactly, sometimes he'll modify it like he did here. So this is a tonal answer. A tonal answer is when he changes it to fit the tonality of the piece of C minor, where a real answer would be an exact transposition of the subject. So when you're looking at reviewing this idea of real and tonal answers on page 491 and on 493, she asks you, is this a real or tonal answer? How do you know? You simply just look at the intervallic content of the melody. And if it is not exact, it's modified so that this sounds like an inversion of a melody still in C minor. We call it a tonal answer. To make this a real answer, and it wouldn't work with this counter subject that he's written, but sometimes he does make it work, he would preserve the exact intervallic content. So here we have a perfect fourth, here we have a perfect fifth, so we would change that to a perfect fourth, and then you can see up a minor second from G to A flat. We would just confirm that now this is from D to E flat, a minor second, and it is. And then we would continue until the entire subject has reappeared in the fugue.